Hi friends, welcome back to ARC Tutorials. We are continuing with our Angular 9 full tutorial series, and today we are going to learn about how to put validations in reactive forms. In the previous episode, we learned about how to use reactive forms in our application. If you have missed out that tutorial, please do so. Please check it out so that you have continuity in learning. Welcome back. My name is Sridhar. I bring over 10 years of experience as a full stack developer, and I'm here to share my knowledge on the modern tech stacks. I'm also here to learn from you all. So during the course of this tutorial series, if you have any doubts, any queries, just ask me in the comment section below. I will be happy to help you for free. I'm putting in a lot of hard work in bringing these tutorials to you. So I will really appreciate if you can like my videos and subscribe to my channel. Thank you in advance. I've created a full playlist on Angular 9 covering from basic introduction to the complex features. There are around 45 tutorials in the playlist so far. If you really want to master Angular 9, this is the tutorial playlist for you. The playlist link is in the description box below, so make sure you check it out. So we are continuing learning on Angular forms. In the past few episodes, we have seen template-driven forms. We have learned about reactive forms. Today we are going to learn how to add validations in our reactive forms. Now, validations in reactive forms are pretty extremely important and integral part to any forms in general. Validations are important to prevent any unwanted data or junk data to be entered in the form by the users. It's a way to restrict certain user behavior in our forms. We can use the common validators, or we can also add custom validators to make sure that our requirement of forms is well handled. We can add validators like minimum length, maximum length, required, email, number, phone number, etc. etc. Angular maintains the state information of this form and also the form controls at all times. So we know that if a particular form control was touched, was valid, is invalid, etc. We will learn all about that in today's hands-on example series when we do. So there are three main approaches to handle validations in reactive forms. There are mainly three ways that you can handle it and show it better for better user experience. So the first approach for using in reactive forms is to highlight the errors, right? So whenever you have errors in the form fields or controls, we can always handle that using CSS. We can highlight which one is error, which is invalid by adding CSS and highlighting that particular class name. The second option is to disable the form itself. So for example, if there is a mandatory field and the user has not entered the mandatory field, we can always disable it. And that's how we can restrict the user to not enter any invalid data or force the user to enter all mandatory fields. The third approach is to use custom field validations, which we will learn now in this hands-on example. Pardon me, I've written here template driven, it should be reactive forms. All right, so that being said, let's go and see one by one approach hands-on example, and we will learn how to implement that in our application forms. Let's get started with hands-on. So to show you where we are, we have a form that we designed, and let me show you that form first. So we have the form that we designed using reactive forms in the previous episode. So make sure you have checked it out if you have not yet already. So that being said, let's apply some validations first. So the first approach is by CSS. So let's open our code, go to our CSS, right? So here we are telling that, so the first rule that we will do is modify our form. So here we'll copy this, paste it. Again, I'll comment this out. I'm commenting it out because now we are going to add some validations. So we will say that for new control, for new form control, we will write it in an array and we will say initial is empty and then we'll say validators dot required. And similarly, so here I'm saying that email address is required using validators. So we have to import that from Angular Forms, and we mention it here that email address is required, right? This is how we will add all the custom validations to our form. So to the form control, which is by the name email address, we are adding the validator and saying that it is a required field. Now let's see that in action. So first I'm going to go to CSS and say that whenever there is an input and it has a class name as ng touched and ng invalid, put the border color as 1px solid red. Simple. So I'm just adding a simple class and I'm saying that whenever there is a form element or a form control which was touched, and if it is invalid, highlight it in the red color. Let's see this in output. So since we said email address is required, I've touched it. Now I step out, you see it has become red color because it is now, if you open the element, when you open the element, you see that Angular has added the classes ng invalid and ng touched because we have touched it by clicking on it and we stepped out without entering a value. And this form control was required, and there is an error in the form. That's why it is red color. Similarly, let's go ahead and add for quantity. So here we are going to go and copy the same for quantity as well and for terms and conditions. Okay, so this is now you see, now we have added three um, form controls and we have added validations for it. And now we are saying that all these three fields are required. So let's see that in action. Now you click on quantity, step out, it has become red color. Now, since with respect to checkbox, it will be little different because it will not be required. It will be required true. So let's add that also. It will not be dot required true. So now this will say that it has to be required. All right. So now if I try and enter this form, let's enter this value. It says it's error, it's error. So let's give some value here. And I try and submit the form. It will give that it is invalid. The form status is invalid because we wanted the terms and conditions to be true but received false. You see here, the status of terms is invalid because we wanted it to be true but we did not get it, and hence it has resulted in an invalid form. Now to handle this use case, what we will do is approach number 2, which is disabling the entire form. Whenever there is a form error or form fields error, we will disable the entire form altogether. Let's see that now how to do that. So in the component.html, go to form submit, and we are going to add the directive disabled equal to. So here the form name is checkout form. If there is checkout form dot, if it is not valid, disable the submit the checkout button. So now you see the checkout button is disabled. You see it is faded out. Now you enter some details and then you enter the quantity, but still the form is not enabled because it requires this checkbox to be true. Now I make it true and the checkbox is enabled. I, I unselect it, it becomes disabled. So this is a way to enforce the user and say that enter all the details, else we will not allow you to even submit the form. That's the beauty of it. At on just by adding validator, we are able to control the entire form, right? Because we said here required true, that's why the entire form is disabled if it is not selected to be true. So this is approach number 2, where we have disabled the form. The third option is to show custom field level validations, right? So what we will do here is we will add a message, and let's add a message to the email address, and I'll write a span. I'll write ngIf equal to, right? So here we will use the checkout form dot get the same name as that of the form control, right? And say dot has error, and we are checking for an error required, right? So here we are saying that if this particular thing has an error, enter email address, right? So if it is required and if we have not used it, so then we can say that it has to be entered. So let's put this in quotes. All right, so now we are saying checkout.form.get. So here we are trying to get the email address and saying that it has error or not. Now, since we have already said that it is a required component here in the our validators.required, we have added that for this control. We have to, in the form, we are using the form name dot get email address, the same value, and I'm saying dot has error required, right? So once you have it, now it will show if you have not entered that value. Let's see that in action. All right, so I'm not entering anything. Now you see here it is already showing that enter email address. When I enter, it is taking that value, right? So if I don't enter, it says enter email address. I want this to be shown only when it is touched. So we can say that ngForm.get dot touched, and if it is touched, and so now you don't see the message by default. Instead, what we will see is we will see that it will only appear when you have touched it and you have not entered the value, right? So you see the error message now. Again, let me show you. When you enter something, or if I just refresh, it will not show by default. Only when you have touched the field and step out by some error, it will show enter field, enter email address. Now let's add some more detail to it. Like similarly, you can add for other fields. Enter quantity, enter quantity, and copy the same form control name. And here also, if it is touched and has error, show the dot touched dot quantity is required, then show this message. Okay, similarly, now we are showing these messages here. Now here what we have to do is we can do better. How? We can add by more validations. Let's say email address. Like the problem I'll show you now with this code. The problem here is this is not validating if it's an email address. If I don't enter anything, it gives enter email address. But if I add just a text, it is still taking it. So we need to add multiple validators, right? So here I'm going to add multiple validators, and I'm going to say validators dot email. So now I'm saying that this is a required field and the validator that has to be applied is email. So now let's go back, enter the same. It is giving error, right? Because it we just said that it has a error required. Now I'm going to copy this again, and here I'm going to say enter valid email address, right? Now you see it won't show anything. If I step out, it says enter email address. Now I enter a text and now it says enter valid email address. You see the difference? When you don't enter, it says enter email address. When you enter wrong email address, it says enter valid email address. Now we enter correct, and now this is correct data, right? So what we are learning here is we can add multiple validators to our form control. I can also add and say I want. Now again, I'll show you the problem with this code. The problem with this code is if I just enter only two characters, right? It says enter valid email address. I want to say validators validators dot minimum length should be 5, and I can say that the maximum length is 10, for example, right? So now you see if I enter only 2, it will give error because it says, right? So for that I'll say enter, I'll say minimum 5 characters required. Here I'll say min length, right? So it is still error because there is no min length that is applied yet. So let's see that. So it says minimum 5 characters required, right? So you can enforce different types in terms of uh, the number of validators you want to add. You can add minimum length, you can add maximum length, you can add email, you can add number, you can add validators required, you can add email address, and so on and so forth. You can build your custom controls and you can add all the validators that are required on your fields. That is the beauty of reactive forms. So this is a custom message through which you can show custom messages into your application. For example, if you see enter valid email address and minimum 5 characters at the same time when you enter some correct, right? So now it says at the rate correct thing, right? So this is how we can handle three types of approaches in our application forms. We can highlight the CSS, which is the errors. We can disable the submit button, and we can add custom form field validations. I hope you like this video. In the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set and how to get values from the form group. Extremely important if you're working with reactive forms, so you don't want to miss out on this one. If you enjoyed this tutorial, if you enjoyed this video, give a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.